So remember our question, could Jesus return at any time if there are certain signs that need to happen first? Let's go back to Matthew 24 and look at another one of the things that Jesus said to his disciples needed to happen before he would return. In verse 29 we read, Jesus says to his disciples, immediately after the anguish of those days, remember we've just been looking at the idea of tribulation, immediately after the anguish of those days, the sun will be darkened, the moon will give no light, the stars will fall from the sky, and the powers in the heavens will be shaken. And then, at last, the sign of the Son of Man is coming, will appear in the heavens, and there will be deep mourning among all the peoples of the earth. And they will see the Son of Man coming on the clouds of heaven with power and great glory. That's quite an incredible statement for Jesus to make. What do we make of that? It might be helpful for us to realise that for the people Jesus was speaking to at the time, this was not a completely unfamiliar idea, because Jesus is drawing on a number of Old Testament images and a number of Old Testament prophetic declarations of what was going to happen. If we turn to Isaiah chapter 13, one of the things that Isaiah shared when he was prophesying, and remember this was around the time when the nation of Israel was being carried away into exile and was facing all the challenges coming onto the kingdoms. Isaiah prophesies this, "For see, the day of the Lord is coming, the terrible day of his fury and fierce anger. The land will be made desolate and all the sinners destroyed with it. The heavens will be black above them, the stars will give no light, the sun will be dark when it rises, and the moon will provide no light. I, the Lord, will punish the world for its evil and the wicked for their sin. I will crush the arrogance of the proud and humble the pride of the mighty. I will make people scarcer than gold, more rare than the fine gold of Ophir. For I will shake the heavens, the earth will move from its place when the Lord of heaven's armies displays his wrath in the day of his fierce anger." So what Jesus is saying is actually drawing on passages like this from the Old Testament. But this isn't the only example in the Old Testament of prophets seeing the sort of end of the world. A passage of the Old Testament that we quite regularly quote when we are thinking about the Holy Spirit and some of the work of the Holy Spirit, where Joel prophesies and Peter picks up that prophecy on the day of Pentecost when he says that God will pour out his Spirit on all people. If you read on just a little bit further from those verses, and often we stop at the verses about God pouring out his Holy Spirit, but if we go on from there, we read that the rest of that prophecy says, "And I will cause wonders in the heavens and on the earth, blood and fire and columns of smoke. The sun will become dark and the moon will turn red before the great and terrible day of the Lord arrives. But everyone who calls on the name of the Lord will be saved." Clearly, there is a sense in the writers of the Old Testament that this is something that God is going to do. I mean, Joel carries on in his next chapter to go on to say, "Thousands upon thousands are waiting in the valley of decision. There the day of the Lord will soon arrive. The sun and moon will grow dark and the stars will no longer shine. The Lord's voice will roar from Zion and thunder from Jerusalem, and the heavens and the earth will shake. But the Lord will be a refuge for his people, a strong fortress for the people of Israel." Clearly, the Old Testament prophets were speaking about a day of the Lord. And these are images that Jesus picks up on when he's talking to his disciples about things that need to happen before he returned. It's interesting in the Great Commission, where Jesus is commissioning his disciples to go out and to preach the good news to all nations. And he encouraged them to stay true to his teaching and share the teaching that he'd given to them. You wonder sometimes what that teaching was. We have the privilege of being able to read the New Testament and read what some of the disciples who were with Jesus had to say. And if we look into the New Testament, we see them unpacking something a little bit further. building on what Jesus had said in Matthew 24. For example, the writer to Hebrews in the very first chapter says, "In the beginning, Lord, you laid the foundations of the earth and made the heavens with your hands. They will perish, but you remain forever. They will wear out like old clothing. You will fold them up like a cloak and discard them like old clothing. But you are the same. You will live forever." It's interesting that these writers pick up some of these themes. And Peter, who was with Jesus, he actually goes a little bit further. He describes it a little bit more. But when he says the day of the Lord will come unexpectedly as a thief, he says, "Then the heavens will pass away with a terrible noise, and the very elements themselves will disappear in fire, and the earth and everything on it will be found to deserve judgment." Since everything around us is going to be destroyed like this, what holy and godly lives should you live, looking forward to the day of God and hurrying it along? On that day he will set the heavens on fire and the elements will melt away in the flames. It's really interesting that the imagery that Jesus is describing is backed up both before Jesus came through the Old Testament, but also backed up by the teaching of the disciples who had been with him, who were sharing the things that Jesus taught them. Clearly, this sense that Jesus had that there is a day when the earth will come to an end seems to be an image that's being drawn on by a lot of different writers. At this point, it would again be something which we might begin to feel afraid about, we might begin to feel scared about, and we might begin to question some of the things that we believe as Christians. When we look at what Jesus is saying to his disciples, and when we read some of these passages, what we see time and time again is that Jesus wants his followers to stay true to him, to have their roots in him and to trust him. And as we unpack this a little bit further in our next session, let's do so, but with hearts that say, "Jesus, I choose to trust you, I choose to have faith in you, and as I try to understand something of what you're saying needs to happen, help me not lose sight of keeping my eyes fixed on you."